This is Diana Richardson, and a warm welcome to the Living Love audio series. Here we are going to explore the fascinating and life-changing world of Tantra and bring it from the realms of the exotic and esoteric into practical daily life.
Diana Richardson is an acclaimed leading authority on sex and is known as an expert in love worldwide. Diana has written 6 books on Tantra, 2 of them with her partner, Michael Richardson. And since 1993, they have been teaching couples how to create more fulfilling love lives in their highly successful Making Love retreats. My name is Mary Spicer, and I'm a professional energy medicine practitioner, intuitive life coach, and radio show host. I'm inspired by Diana's teachings on the energy body and its potential, and her desire to bring consciousness and awareness to sex. In session 1 of our Living Love audio series, we'll be touching on Tantra, sexual conditioning and goal orientation, and living in the present moment. If you would like to delve deeper into the information presented in this session, please purchase Diana Richardson's book, The Heart of Tantric Sex. Diana Richardson, what is Tantra?
My focus and my interest and my personal research has been in the sexual aspect of Tantra, the union of sex and meditation.
What is sex and meditation? How do we wed those?
When we talk about meditation, we are talking about the capacity to be present in the here now. We are bringing that quality and that intention into the sexual act and to create presence and being completely here in the body, allowing things to unfold rather than having a set program, which is the tendency in the way we generally have sex. There's the goal that we want to have an orgasm. So we can say the union of sex and meditation is sex with no goal and no real end to it.
What does the word Tantra mean? What's the history of Tantra?
Well, the whole of Tantra comes originally from India, and it's many thousands of years old, apparently around 15,000 years. The word Tantra itself is an ancient Sanskrit word, and it means expansion of energy, expansion of consciousness, web of consciousness.
Do you have to practice to be a tantric person?
Well, in fact, nature has given every individual tantric potential. And in that sense, every person is actually born with an innate, inbuilt tantric design. The situation, though, is that our society and the imprints that we get about sex cause us to shift, take a sidestep away from that essential nature. It's a matter for an individual, a couple, to want to explore what is built into the body and let go of the ideas and conditioning that we do have around sex.
What you're saying is that Tantra is just awareness. It's coming into the body.
That's correct, because essentially if we look at conventional sex and how we are doing it, there's, relatively speaking, a lack of awareness, because we're very much in routines and patterns and goals that we are not aware of. It just seems to be like what we do. Indeed, awareness is the foundation of Tantra. It's beginning to bring the observer or the witness or the watcher into the sexual act and start to challenge and break down the patterns that have been imprinted in us by the society.
In your work, you've actually described what conventional sex is and then what tantric sex is. Tell me about those 2 different types of energy and how they work.
There are 2 phases to the sexual energy circuitry. The first is the energy is raised in the brain, in the endocrine glands, and it goes downwards to the genitals. And this is what we call the reproductive or biological phase of the sexual energy. In that phase, there's a lot of tension, there's a compression of the vitality so that ultimately the flow is outwards. No? It's a downward discharge. Now, that is the circuit that is generally lived and known in our society. But unknown to us, there is a return circuit from the genitals to the brain where the energy returns to its source and energizes its source. And this is the aspect of tantric sex, and to allow or encourage this rising of energy that the body is designed for, it involves relaxation and containment of that vitality so that there's a kind of a looping happening in the body and a complete fulfillment of the circle. Whereas by contrast, in conventional sex, we're only living the one half of the potential because the vitality is lost in an orgasm.
Okay, Diana, let me see if I have this right. In the reproductive biological aspect, the vitality or the energy is raised from the pineal and pituitary glands, which are in the brain, and then that energy flows downward to the genitals, where in conventional or traditional sex, it is normally discharged in an orgasm. And so what I'm wondering is what you are expressing is that through relaxation and containing the energy, instead of habitually going for orgasm, then that same vitality remains in the body and rises and returns back to its source in the brain. And thus it's completing the circuit. And I believe in your books you call the upward cycle from the genitals back to the brain the generative or spiritual phase.
Yes, that's correct.
That's so exciting.
And it's interesting. So to really start to address and honor the intelligence that is built into the body, the real place for us to start is with this aspect of orgasm, which is considered to be the reason we have sex. That is always the starting point because we cannot make the energy rise. We have to start containing it, and the body will then raise it in its own time and in its own way. So it's a very, very different approach.
When you express about containing the energy, what does that mean?
Well, basically containment means not to create discharge, because if you look at yourself in sex, there is always this pressure and this desire to have a peak experience. And there's quite some elements that go into building up the energy to that peak. There's quite a lot of tension. Usually there's stimulation, there's excitement, there's a lot of movement. The genitals, penis and vagina, there's a lot of friction. So these are all inherited behaviors, like learned behaviors. In many senses, what we have to do is to unlearn and not build up to a peak, more to relax into the sensitivity of the body and come into like a cellular aliveness in the body, or giving more subtle sensations a value rather than sensational sensations that we tend to expect in conventional sex.
And so if someone is, in a sense, you've described it as a program, conventional sex, tell me, where does that program start? How are we taught that program?
It is hard to say. The fact is that is the reproductive cycle, conventional sex. There's a discharge of semen and the potential for another life. How come we got into a pattern and stayed there and have not consciously been able to move ourselves out of there? I have no idea. But perhaps it's nature's way of guaranteeing reproduction and population of the planet. So this is really something that comes into us unconsciously as a conditioning. All conditionings are unconscious. So we get imprints that through the media, through the secrecy, through the lack of information, we get these imprints of how sex should look. Now, in my life, I have met people who have not been conditioned, who naturally are in this domain of being present and containing the energy. However, this is 99.9% of people are conditioned, but one or two little bright sparks slip through the conditioning.
You learned this other way, this way of taking the circuitry instead of just having this discharge. You went into this lifelong exploration of this other side of sex, the completion of the circuit to go back up from the genitals and up into the brain again, completing the circuit and creating more vitality. In our society, we are trained very early on what sex is. How do you think we can actually shift some of that programming out of the way we may think sex should be?
Well, the starting place is to really question this style where we are building up, because the conditioning is about peak and discharge and a very deep belief in that. So when I started exploring in my early 30s, and that's a good 25 years ago, I just started there. I had no idea where this thing would lead to, but out of a kind of a curiosity that there must be more than this pattern that I seem to be repeating again and again. So I started simply by not going with that desire, not going with that thrust towards completion. And so, like we said earlier, it's a matter of awareness and watching yourself, that you stay anchored in your body, in the here now, and not to follow the impulses that will come.
And that's the impulse to have an orgasm.
Yes, that sex has to be exciting or to build up excitement. Because when we do that, we are accessing our vitality or our body energy at a relatively superficial level. Enjoyable, no doubt, but superficial. However, when we start to relax more into the senses and bring awareness into what we are doing as we are doing it, this opens up a whole other level of body perception and realizing that the way the body is designed depends on subtlety and not on sensation as in conventional. So that we need to step back from creating sensation, going a lot into stimulation, and coming down to the moment and really seeing what is happening between the penis and the vagina when they are united without me actually doing anything. So essentially, and this is where it hooks back to meditation, because as humans we are conditioned to do in all kinds of things. It's very difficult for us to relax and just to be. So we can say meditation is the capacity to be. And so in that sense, we are bringing this inquiry into the sexual center and how to be with my genitals and see how they communicate with each other without ideas, fears, desires in my mind coming to interfere with that.
I know a lot of your work is around sexual conditioning and goal orientation. Tell me a little bit about that.
If you talk to many people, if we have sex and we don't have an orgasm, then we think that something is wrong. What has happened in our psyches and in our expectations is that sex equals an orgasm, and sex without orgasm is a problem. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong per se in orgasm. It's a beautiful experience. It's also necessary for reproduction. The problem really is that we in a pattern with it, or we in a routine, and we expect the same thing again and again and again. And we don't have any options in sex. So we're just running along this very narrow street. So in very subtle ways, and also not so subtle ways, that orgasm has become the goal. It's the reason we have sex. And as I said, if we don't have it, then it wasn't really sex. So generally speaking, when people enter into sex, at the end of the street, what they see is an orgasm. So everything that we do along the way is feeding that intention or that goal. And we might not be thinking about the orgasm all the time we're having sex, but if you really bring awareness and look very closely, you'll notice that each movement, say for instance, an example, penetration, okay, every time for man and for woman too, indirectly or at a subtle level, we are more interested in the next penetration, not the one that is happening now. So there's this capacity, or what we've created is that we're always a little bit ahead of ourselves. So this penetration is leading to the next, which is slowly going to bring us to reach our goal. This is such a subtle behavior, and we're not really aware that it's going on. And the problem with being a little bit in the future, as in conventional sex, is that there is a very high level of absence. That means we are not really here. Because if we have a goal, that puts us in the future. And if we're in the future, where are we now? We are actually not really here. And this is the significance of questioning this need for an orgasm, or that orgasm equals sex, because that is changing our behavior and then also shifting us away from accessing the intelligence that exists in the body. We need to come back to here now. And the moment there's orgasm in the field, that is going to pull us away. So to invite Tantra, or to access this deeper system or circuitry in the body, we have to discover how to really listen to the genitals in the here and now. And then from there's just an unfolding moment by moment. The bodies know what to do. It's just more our minds that have gotten in the way. So that's why essentially we can say that if you start to explore Tantra, it is a deconditioning process. You start to unlearn and unwind the behaviors that you inherited from the society. And the fact is that orgasm orientation, it's in our psyche. It's not so much to do with our body. So when you start to inquire into the deeper potential of sex, as in Tantra, then really what we are doing is we are changing our psyche. There's a shift in how we look at sex, how we experience sex, how we view sex. So it's an extremely valuable exploration because it breaks us away from the convention that is right through our society. And so many misunderstandings around sex, misunderstandings for men, misunderstandings for women. And this has a tremendous impact, these misunderstandings, on our capacity to live loving and harmonious relationships.
And so what you're saying is take your hand off the wheel, come back and be in the body, be in the present moment. Tell me about accessing the present moment. Is there any cues, any tips, any ideas that you could give our listeners around accessing the present moment?
When you start to bring awareness into that genital connection, then it's almost like we start to shine the light on our sexual behavior. And in Tantra, it's not what you do, but how you do it. So, I can lift a glass of water with no awareness, and it's a very mechanical action, or I can raise a glass of water and drink with awareness, and it'll be much more slow and sensitive. So the most important thing to realize that awareness is a very powerful transforming force. And as soon as we become aware, we very naturally slow down. It's just a byproduct of awareness, is slowness. And as soon as we slow down, then the outcome of slowness is sensitivity. So awareness opens up a new perception in the body. Shift from mechanical and in routines to being present and conscious with each and everything that you are doing. And in fact, one of the most beautiful definitions that I have heard of Tantra is the transformation of sex into love through the awareness. And that tells us so much that, in fact, awareness creates love. So when we bring awareness into sex, love is the byproduct. So awareness is a generator of love, and especially when we bring it down into this sexual domain or sexual field, it is so powerfully transforming. And, in my couples workshops, I just see it within 2-3 days of teaching people to be more conscious in the body, to stay away from the goals and the orgasm, to be more here now, to listen to the body. People fall in love. So re-fall in love. People say so often, it's like feeling how we felt when we first met, when we were in our honeymoon. And the fact is, when we first meet each other, we are very present, because it's all unknown. So naturally, there's a high level of awareness. And love is created, love is generated. But slowly we slip into patterns and routines, and that high level of awareness reduces. So essentially, changing from conventional sex to tantric sex is more like to be more introverted, concerned about the inside of your own body, whereas in conventional sex we're more concerned about the other person's body. So this is a basic shift, that we have to pull our awareness into our own bodies. And through doing that, then we can start to consciously relax. And when we consciously relax, then there's an expansion of the inner sensitivity.
Diana, what you've been describing so much through your definition of Tantra, it's really returning to a sense of trusting the body, coming back to a sense of innocence with the body, and also trusting nature, which you've described. It's so much about trusting the body, belonging to the body again. And as you said, it's really that introverted view. Instead of how does the other person feel, how do I feel? What are my sensations?
Yes, that's right. And I love that word innocence that you used, because that is the key. Just to come back to this wonder, and see what is there for us to learn. Like you say, trusting the body, relaxing into the body. The situation in our society is such that even though we have bodies and we use bodies day by day, we don't have much awareness in the body. So we're mechanical with how we do everything. So that is the case in sex also. So it's a matter of bringing sex back down to these very simple elements given us by nature, and a certain intelligence in the body, which we are born with, but our society, our education does not encourage us to look inwards, introvert. We're much more concerned about the outside, and also we look at our bodies from the outside. So it's much more about appearance, looking good, having a nice figure, all these things. But ultimately, it's really, does that body have the capacity to feel itself from within, to access the senses, and also to realize that awareness in itself is a sense. We have the 5 given senses, but awareness is an additional sense that we can embrace and pull very strongly into our lives and our sex lives, and then experience a very transformed reality through that awareness.
Even bringing awareness into our sexuality and bringing awareness into our lives, not only will it change our sex life, it may change the way we live.
Certainly I found that for myself, that suddenly, I was just more interested in just being in my body. I was not so interested in talking to people or being sociable, but much more happy being in a crowd, but sitting, feeling anchored, in my own reality. And I was surprised what an impact these small shifts in the centerpiece of life, sex, what an impact it had on how I perceived other people, how I perceived myself, how I perceived sex. So it is life-changing, and it changes your psyche. So your whole vision of sex completely shifts, and with that, your vision of men, your vision of women, your vision of relationship. Teaching couples now for well over 20 years, so frequently I hear from people afterwards that our lives have changed completely. So it's not to be underestimated, this inquiry into sex, and especially how we do it. Not what we do, but how. Because that how is what really changes the whole picture completely.
Is there any tips that you would give our listeners on how to create awareness in their sex lives?
The first thing to realize is that a lot of sex is involved with fantasy, which is an aspect of the mind, or even having a goal, it's something in the mind. So the first thing really is to start to shift from thinking to feeling. And what I always suggest to people is to look inside the body and find a place that they can easily feel from the inside. It could be the belly, it could be the solar plexus, it could be anywhere. But to use a place in the body that anchors them in the body, and to stay with that place while they are making love. And this will naturally cause a shift from mind to body. And when we are in the body, then we are more capable to engage the senses. So to shift away from sensation and building up tension, to build up to a peak, of orgasm, that we then start to really be more subtle, be more sensitive, relax into just being in the sex rather than doing in sex. Because this doing is a very, very big conditioning that we feel we have to do something. It has put a lot of performance pressure on men and on women, and men in particular. Men have a lot to achieve in sex. They have to have an erection, they have to keep an erection, they have to avoid coming too soon. They like that their woman has an orgasm. If possible, you have an orgasm together. So these pressures are very much influencing man's sexual behavior. So in that sense, man is very often more hooked up in his mind than actually relaxed, listening and trusting into his own penis, and that his penis knows how to relate to the vagina. So this is the value of shifting from doing to being, and it also involves shifting from tension to relaxation, because if we observe our bodies as we build up towards the orgasm, we get more and more tense, and that means we are compressing the body energy. So that's also why it flows downwards. So one of the arts is to really keep relaxing. Relax the genitals. Women relax the vagina. Men, the base of the penis, the perineum. And start to experience through expansion, inner expansion, how then the sensitivity increases and the senses become amplified. When there is less excitement and stimulation, it can be that erection is not so strong or not so quick to happen. So for this reason, it is of value for a couple, for a man, to learn how to do a soft entry, to learn how to put the penis inside in his relaxed state, because then it gives a very innocent, simple start to the lovemaking. It also means that you can start making love right away. You don't have to wait until his erection, and it's good for a man to experience his penis in both these ways. With erection, without erection. What is important to say is that for man, we're not talking about repressing ejaculation. If ejaculation is there in the field, let it through. It's more about inquiring into the habit. And repressing an ejaculation is not so healthy in the long run. It's much better to learn to develop a style of lovemaking that's more relaxed and not always going into the we can call the hotter zones of sex. So it's not to give the impression that there is anything wrong with orgasm. It's more to inquire into the pattern, and of course along the way there will be orgasms. It's always, for man and woman to look to see how much effort, how much intention, how much tension we are creating in order that we do reach the orgasm. And then when one starts to contain the energy, not to again and again discharge it, then you can start to feel and experience how empowering that is. That there's not this, what we can almost say, a leakage through sex. So there's tremendous value in containing the energy. Definitely it brings clarity, creativity, better health. So it's a very worthy investigation to make, even that it goes against our conditioning and our expectations.
Diana, earlier you mentioned fantasy. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
One of the main problems in sex today is that it's a lot to do with fantasy and not much to do with reality. And very often fantasy has become the fuel of sex. It's through fantasy that we get excited, that erections happen. In this sense, sex has become mindy, and that we have to do something. We need to cut away from the fantasies and come back to literally what is in the body. And if you want to have some kind of a fantasy, I suggest that rather you use visualization.
When you're saying fantasy, does that actually mean when someone is in the act of having sex that they're having a fantasy running in their mind?
Well, many people today fantasize about sex. They fantasize about sex when they're not having sex, and also while they are having sex, they will have closed eyes and they will be in a fantasy, imagining or fantasizing about a certain situation. And this is what turns them on. This is what will bring them to the peak. To the orgasm. This fantasy, which is an aspect of the mind, has really made something additional to us. We're already a bit mind-oriented, but fantasy has taken us further into our minds and away from the intelligence of the body.
It's completely confusing in a sense. We're actually with someone having sex with them, and then in our mind, we're completely somewhere else. Takes us out of the present moment.
That's right. I'm not saying that every person is fantasizing all the time, but there is a lot of it going on, that people are using fantasy as a fuel to raise up the energy, to get everything a little bit hotter. That is why one thing that we really suggest is that people make love with open eyes. Then you really are in the here and now. Also eye contact is good. That keeps us anchored in the present and connected to the person that we are making love with. So through open eyes, it helps you to shift back from the mind into the body.
I wanted to ask you if people would like to get more information on what is Tantra, on sexual conditioning and goal orientation, and how to access the present moment. How can they get more information on that?
I suggest that people look at the book, The Heart of Tantric Sex, and there I have in great detail gone into what I call the love keys. For instance, eye contact, how to use the eyes with soft vision. Other aspects is communication, how to use very simple communication to establish a new inner reality. Another aspect is how to keep attention, the focus in your own body. We talk about movement, erection, also different positions one can take. And here, if one really looks at those, there's all the information that you need to begin a journey into uncovering or discovering your orgasmic potential.
For more information on Diana Richardson's work and the Making Love retreats, please visit livinglove.com. There you'll find info on her life-changing books, The Heart of Tantric Sex, Tantric Orgasm for Women, Tantric Sex for Men, Tantric Love, Feeling versus Emotion, and her latest book, Slow Sex. The award-winning documentary-style film, Slow Sex, is available at www.livingloveshop.com. This is a great educational movie for parents, teens, young adults, and couples of all ages. In Session 2, we'll be touching on the body's magnetic potentials, orgasm and orgasmic states, and Tantra from the male and female perspective. This is Mary Spicer, and a warm thank you for joining us in our Living Love audio series.